During Japan's Sengoku, Warring States period, powerful warlords fought for dominance across the country, and warfare continued with no end in sight. However, with the establishment of the Tokugawa shogunate, Japan entered an era of lasting peace, and the martial arts underwent a profound transformation. In addition to techniques designed to kill enemies on the battlefield, new systems were developed for capturing criminals alive, including arresting techniques, tori-jutsu, and methods of self-defense. On the battlefields of the Sengoku era, samurai fought clad in armor. After exchanging several blows with their swords, combat often devolved into close grappling. As a result, sophisticated techniques were developed for inserting a dagger into the gaps of an opponent's armor, as well as joint locking and grappling methods known as kumiuchi. During the peaceful Edo period, these battlefield skills evolved into tori-jutsu, the art of subduing and apprehending criminals, and were systematically preserved and refined within numerous martial traditions. In a broad sense, these traditions are often regarded as the roots of Japanese Jujutsu. Techniques for restraining suspects without killing them also reached a high level of sophistication. One such discipline was hojojutsu, the art of binding prisoners with rope. In addition, law enforcement developed the famous three arresting implements: torimono mitsudogu, the sasumata, forked pole, sodegarami, barbed sleeve entangler, and tsukibo, pushing pole. Together with tori-jutsu, these tools had a profound influence on the development of Edo period schools of jujutsu, and some traditional schools still preserve training in these weapons today. When confronting skilled swordsmen, such as samurai or masterless warriors, ronin, the standard tactic was not single combat. Instead, several officers would surround the suspect while maintaining a safe distance, using arresting implements and bamboo ladders to control and subdue the individual. With peace established throughout the Edo period, swordsmen no longer had opportunities to test their blades on the battlefield. Instead, they found a new setting in which to evaluate the cutting ability of swords and the effectiveness of their techniques, the execution grounds. Throughout history, many societies have employed punishments that would be considered unimaginable today, often as a means of deterring crime, and Japan was no exception. Although the ritual suicide of samurai seppuku is widely known around the world, the Edo period featured many other forms of punishment. Among the most unusual was the official institution known as otameshi goyo, official test cutting duty. Under this system, officially appointed sword testers conducted test cutting on the bodies of executed criminals to evaluate the sharpness and quality of swords. The practice is believed to have originated in the late Sengoku period from suemonogiri, the testing of blades on human bodies to assess their effectiveness in actual combat. Once warfare came to an end and opportunities to test swords in battle disappeared, test cutting evolved into an official means of evaluating sword performance, eventually becoming an established institution under the Tokugawa shogunate. The family most closely associated with this office was the Yamada family. For 9 successive generations, the hereditary title of Yamada Asaemon served as the shogunate's official sword testers, becoming legendary figures in the history of Japanese swords. The Yamada family was responsible not only for carrying out executions by beheading, but also for conducting test cutting on swords entrusted to them by the Tokugawa shogunate, feudal lords, and swordsmiths. The results of these tests were sometimes engraved on the tang of the blade as a tameshi-mei test inscription. These inscriptions recorded how many human bodies a sword could cut through in a single stroke. The finest blades were said to have sliced cleanly through as many as 7 stacked corpses with one cut. Such records became an important measure of a sword's quality and remain highly significant in the history of Japanese sword appraisal. Performing test cuts on valuable swords owned by the shogunate and powerful daimyo required extraordinary swordsmanship as well as an exceptional understanding of Japanese blades. At the time, very few people outside the samurai class possessed such skills. However, carrying out executions and handling corpses was considered a source of ritual impurity, kegare, making it socially unacceptable for high-ranking samurai to perform these duties. The man ultimately chosen for this role was Yamada Asaemon, a master swordsman who was a ronin, a former samurai who had lost his lord. Officially appointed by the Tokugawa government as the Otomeshi Goyo, official sword tester, the Yamada family carried out executions and sword testing for generations, with the title being inherited through 9 successive heads of the family. The Yamada family is also famous for classifying Japanese swords into 4 grades based on cutting performance. Saijo Owazamono, supreme great sharpness. Owazamono, great sharpness. Yokiwazamono, excellent sharpness. And Wazamono, sharpness. These evaluations were compiled in sword appraisal books such as the Kaiho Kenjaku. Because these rankings were based on actual test cutting using human bodies, they are still regarded as some of the most reliable historical sources for evaluating the quality of Japanese swords. This was the workplace of Yamada Asaemon. The area surrounding this Jizo statue was once the largest execution ground in Edo. Even today, construction work in the area occasionally uncovers human remains. Crucifixion, public display of severed heads, execution by burning and beheading were all carried out here. The Jizo statue was erected to pray for the souls of those who were executed at this site. It is said that the gentle face of this Jizo may have been the last thing many condemned prisoners saw before their deaths. Many of the bodies were left exposed to the elements, where dogs and weasels fed upon them. The area was reportedly filled with the stench of decay, creating a scene described as resembling hell itself. Over time, people came to call this statue Kubikiri Jizo, the beheading Jizo. Although this execution ground was abolished in 1873, Meiji 6, it is said that more than 200,000 people were executed there before its closure, and some historians believe that as many as 35% of them may have been victims of wrongful convictions. With the abolition of beheading in 1881, Meiji 14, the Yamada Asaemon family was relieved of its official duties, bringing to an end nearly 2 centuries of service as the shogunate's official sword testers. Today, tameshigiri, test cutting, is practiced using rolled straw mats, tatami omoti, and green bamboo as a method of developing proper cutting mechanics, body movement, and distancing. However, the test cutting practiced in modern Iaido and battojutsu is widely believed to trace its origins back to the test cutting traditions of the Edo period. According to one theory, tatami and straw are used because their resilience resembles that of human muscle, while green bamboo is used because it approximates the resistance of bone. 18 years after the Yamada Asaemon family's official role came to an end, a swordsman was born who would go on to leave his own mark on the history of Japanese swordsmanship. The founder of Takayama-ryu battojutsu was Masakichi Takayama. From an early age, Takayama studied kendo under masters such as Sosuke Nakano. In 1923, he moved to Kyoto and became a disciple of Koji Naito, a hanshi, master instructor of kendo. At the time, the title of hanshi represented the highest rank in Japanese martial arts. In 1926, Takayama was awarded the Kendo Sirensho by the Dai Nippon Butoku Kai, and in 1934, he was promoted to the rank of Kyoshi, senior instructor. Takayama later recalled that his research into martial arts began in June 1925. when he accompanied the Dai Nippon Butoku Kai on an inspection tour of Korea and Manchuria. During this journey, he visited the battlefields of Port Arthur and East Coxcomb Hill Fort, sites of fierce fighting during the Russo-Japanese War, an experience that profoundly influenced his thinking. In October 1925, the Toyama Military Academy, responsible for researching and teaching infantry combat techniques, began studying a new method of swordsmanship for the military. Drawing upon traditional Japanese schools of Ii-jutsu, the project sought to develop practical methods for using the military sword effectively in combat. This research would eventually form the foundation of the Imperial Japanese Army's standardized military swordsmanship. The one-handed saber-style military sword had drawn criticism from soldiers who questioned its effectiveness in actual combat. Takayama argued that it should instead be redesigned according to the traditional Japanese sword. At the same time, a widespread belief within the military held that after a bayonet penetrated an enemy's body, flesh would cling to the blade, making it difficult to withdraw quickly. Serving as a martial arts instructor at the Maizuru Naval District, Takayama conducted cutting tests on pigs, dogs, and various other targets to disprove this belief. Although he presented the results of these experiments to the military, they received little attention. It is said that this led him to resolve to test his theories on an actual battlefield. When the Mukden Incident triggered the Manchurian Incident in 1931, Takayama believed that the opportunity had finally arrived to verify his swordsmanship through real combat. Acting under confidential orders from Admiral Nobumasa Suetsugu, he was dispatched to the China front, where he joined the 16th Division during the campaign leading to the capture of Nanjing. In Nanjing, under the command of Lieutenant General Kesago Nakajima, Takayama was assigned to conduct cutting tests. According to historical accounts, he performed test cutting on 7 prisoners, believing that the results demonstrated the practical effectiveness of his theories under wartime conditions.
Today at noon, swordsman Takayama arrived. 7 prisoners were available, and I immediately had him conduct test cutting. At that time, I also had him test my own sword, and he cleanly severed 2 heads.
This wartime service became the catalyst for Takayama to systematize the sword method he had envisioned for modern warfare. Following the capture of Nanjing, he began drafting a system of close combat swordsmanship at Chiang Kai-shek's official residence, completing it the following year in 1938.
Conventional kendo training is practiced with the conviction of cutting, yet in reality it is merely striking. In actual combat, however, one must truly cut the target. This requires making full use of the length of the blade, that is, employing the sword deeply. Consequently, the mechanics of striking and cutting are fundamentally opposite. Furthermore, there are only 2 ways to cut an object, by drawing the blade or by pushing it. The theory of push cutting arose from kendo practice. When a housewife slices a daikon radish into thin strips, or when a butcher cuts meat, they use a pushing motion. Slicing sashimi, on the other hand, follows the principle of draw cutting. In actual combat with the Japanese sword, regardless of the circumstances, the proper method is draw cutting. Push cutting is effective only after an opponent has been pinned to the ground. Thus, kendo practiced with the bamboo sword and the practical use of the Japanese sword in combat are entirely different. Reform of martial instruction for actual combat is a subject that deserves much further study.
In 1939, Takayama was assigned by the Imperial Japanese Navy's 3rd Fleet to the Shanghai Special Naval Landing Force headquarters, where he participated in drafting a manual on close combat swordsmanship, Hakuhei battojutsu. After returning to Japan, he compiled the combat experience he had gained during the Second Sino-Japanese War into his paper Observations on the Reform of Budo, Budo Kaikaku Shoken. At the same time, he began researching and developing a new military sword that would later become known as the Takayama sword. Working closely with master swordsmiths in Seki City, Gifu Prefecture, Japan's most renowned center of sword-making, he continually refined its design in pursuit of a weapon that would perform effectively under actual battlefield conditions. For Takayama, swordsmanship and the military sword itself were inseparable. Improving both as a unified system formed the foundation of his vision for reforming Japanese martial arts. His theories and practical achievements earned high praise within the Navy. He was invited to deliver lectures and demonstrations at institutions including the Maizuru Naval Training Corps and the Imperial Japanese Naval Academy. His system was eventually adopted by the Naval Engineering School as its official method of close combat swordsmanship. In 1940, he publicly demonstrated Takayama-ryu Hakuhei battojutsu at the Dai Nippon Butokukai National Tournament in Kyoto. What had begun as a combat method developed through the experience of a small number of veterans evolved into a systematic curriculum incorporated into military training. Takayama's success within the Navy soon attracted the attention of the Imperial Japanese Army. Reportedly recommended by General Kanji Ishiwara, his theories were examined at the Toyama Army Academy. Following a formal recommendation by Master Hiromichi Nakayama, the system was reviewed by General Senjuro Hayashi and General Hisakazu Tanaka. On October 18, 1939, with the approval of Army Minister Hideki Tojo, Takayama's swordsmanship was officially adopted by the Army. Takayama himself was appointed as a lifetime instructor, and his methods were subsequently taught to Army officers throughout Japan. In May 1940, with the support of Lieutenant General Kesago Nakajima, Takayama submitted his manuscript Hakuhei Battojutsu based on his wartime experience in China to General Hisakazu Tanaka, Commandant of the Toyama Army Academy. Later that November, the Academy published Military Sword Techniques and Test Cutting, Gunto no Soho Oyobi Tamashigiri, as a supplement to Kaikosha Journal and distributed it to officers nationwide. The volume became the Army's standard instructional manual for military sword training and reflected Takayama's theories to a significant degree. In 1941, at the invitation of Colonel Onitsuka, Takayama was assigned to the Yokosuka Naval Gunnery School, where he undertook the important task of compiling the Navy's official martial arts manual. He continued to publish works such as Actual Combat and the Reform of Martial Arts, advocating a philosophy of Budo grounded in first-hand battlefield experience. In 1943, the Navy officially promulgated its martial arts manual, and the Ministry of Health and Welfare also adopted Takayama's system as part of its program for national defense martial arts. That same year, following consultations between the Imperial Japanese Navy and the Dai Nippon Butokukai, Takayama was awarded the rank of Hanshi, 9th Dan in Kendo, Iaido, and Jukendo, bayonet fencing. These honors reflected the high regard in which his contributions were held by the Japanese martial arts community. On January 19, 1944, a nationwide instructional system was established to promote the spread of Takayama's sword method, Takayama-to, throughout Japan. Regional training centers were designated as follows: the Tokyo Higher Normal School Dojo for the Tohoku region, the Kyoto Butokuden for the Chubu region, the Kure Naval Training Corps for Western Japan and Shikoku, and the Sasebo Naval Training Corps for Kyushu. A systematic program of instruction was planned through these centers. Takayama himself was appointed as the person responsible for the nationwide dissemination of the system and was awarded the rank of 10th Dan. His sword method was expected to become the standard military swordsmanship practiced throughout the country. Before this vision could be fully realized, however, the war came to an end on August 15, 1945. Takayama was teaching swordsmanship at the Nara Air Corps when Japan surrendered. The nation's defeat also represented the collapse of the martial arts reform that Takayama had devoted his life to pursuing. It is said that he briefly resolved to take his own life but was persuaded otherwise by a former naval colonel who had served as chief instructor of moral training at the Naval Engineering School. Instead, Takayama chose to preserve and pass on the results of his lifelong research. Following Japan's defeat, the country came under the occupation of the Supreme Commander for the Allied Powers, GHQ, during which the practice of martial arts and the manufacture of Japanese swords were placed under strict restrictions. These limitations were lifted after the San Francisco Peace Treaty came into effect in 1952, ending the occupation. Martial arts were subsequently revived as sports and educational disciplines, while Japanese swords were once again permitted to be produced as works of art. During this period of post-war reconstruction, Morinaga Kiyoshi, the former head of the swordsmanship department at the Imperial Japanese Army's Toyama Military Academy, worked to preserve and promote the sword methods developed at the academy under the name Takayama-ryu Iaido. Today, despite its relatively modern origins, Takayama-ryu has established itself as one of the major schools of Iaido. Takayama-ryu, which had developed primarily within the Imperial Japanese Navy, followed a very different path. Takayama Masakichi's direct disciple and second-generation successor, sought to preserve the tradition by establishing the Takayama-ryu Toho Iaido Research Institute at his home. Nevertheless, only a handful of practitioners remained in Maizuru City. As the years passed, many of those connected with the school also died, and today, very few individuals are believed to possess a direct transmission of the original Takayama-ryu. Koyama also petitioned the Decorations Bureau to have his teacher Takayama Masakichi officially recognized for his contributions to the development of military swordsmanship. However, the Bureau determined that achievements made before and during the Second World War were not eligible for such honors, and his request was ultimately denied. Today, some practitioners of Japanese swordsmanship are attempting to reconstruct Takayama's sword method based on the materials he left behind. The narration explains that Takayama-ryu emphasizes the use of the entire body, placing the highest priority on reliable drawing and decisive cutting. It contains no elaborate or highly technical movements, making it comparatively easy to learn. Techniques that could only be mastered by exceptional experts were deliberately omitted, leaving only fundamental, highly effective methods combined into a practical system. Its purpose was to produce competent soldiers in the shortest possible time. During the Edo period, Yamada Asaemon pursued the study of sword performance and cutting ability through executions and tameshigiri, test cutting on human bodies. Likewise, Masakichi Takayama repeatedly conducted test cutting on a wide range of targets, including bundles of straw, bamboo, pigs, dogs, and even human bodies, to rigorously verify the effectiveness and rationality of his sword method. What united the two men was their commitment to empirical verification rather than theory or tradition. Both sought to understand the act of cutting through practical evidence. However, there was a fundamental difference in their objectives. Yamada Asaemon's primary role was to evaluate the quality of swords and demonstrate their cutting performance. Takayama, by contrast, sought to systematize swordsmanship as a practical combat method that would enable soldiers to survive on the modern battlefield. Looking back across the history of Japanese martial arts, from the Sengoku period through the Edo period and into the modern era, it is clear that their character changed dramatically with the times. During peaceful periods, martial arts evolved into systems of self-defense, arresting techniques, competitive sports, and methods of personal cultivation. Yet their original purpose lay in the techniques of war, developed to ensure survival on the battlefield. Takayama's career demonstrates that martial arts were not originally created for character development or etiquette, but as a body of practical skills refined for survival in combat. In this sense, he stands as one of the last remarkable practitioners in modern history to pursue that original purpose to its fullest extent. Seen from this perspective, Takayama can be regarded as the modern successor to the tradition of empirical test cutting represented by Yamada Asaemon. While inheriting the spirit of investigating the realities of cutting, he sought to adapt that tradition to the demands of modern warfare.